You can never start too young to introduce engineering concepts.
Science and math aren't really, something far off and removed from them. It's something fun, something useful.
There are fun aspects to engineering, and we're trying to get that across.
There happened to be a very strong desire for the IEEE EMBS Buenaventura section to reach out to the surrounding community. We figured the best way to do this would be to create some kind of outreach program where we could talk to middle schoolers about becoming engineers and what engineering is.
And we're trying to get people more interested in engineering and show that it's not just like kind of what they might see as a whole bunch of like old people like working in a lab, like slaving over a lab bench.
And it's good to get them to start learning about these things early, because then they can continue learning and just continue to further their knowledge.
Here we are in Ventura, California at Poinsettia Elementary School, and we're here to put on a little outreach program for the kids featuring the neuron and prosthetics. So first of all, we're bioengineers, but what is an engineer? Does anyone have any idea? Yeah, you.
Somebody who drives a train.
Someone who drives a train. Yeah?
Someone who builds, like, buildings.
Builds buildings. Yeah?
Also known as a mechanic.
A mechanic. These are all correct answers. This first one is more of a traditional type of engineer. We are more in line with people who are trained and skilled in the use, design, construction of machines and engines. We have science and math, and we bring them together and we solve problems. There are a lot of different types of engineering. Chemical engineers make chemical compounds and drugs like new aspirins and stuff like that. We have mechanical engineers who make new types of machines, who might indeed make trains. Also, when you said build buildings, that would be a good example of a civil engineer. They build bridges and other types of structures for towns and cities. There's a lot of different ones. We're bioengineers, and what that means is we take physics and chemistry and math and we apply it to a biological setting. We look at how we can apply traditional physics to what goes on inside your body, for example. And today we're here to talk to you about prosthetics. It's an external device that we have that you place on somebody to replace a function that is lost somehow. So we have some common prostheses. The first one is called a cochlear implant, and the cochlea is a part of your ear. So this implant actually helps people who are legally deaf hear again. Another example, more simple one, reading glasses, corrective lenses are a type of prosthetic. Also, contact lenses are a type of prosthetic because it's helping a function that is impaired. We also have, in the future, they hope to develop contact lenses that will have kind of a heads-up display, tell you what the temperature is outside, give you news reports. So all this will be like right in your eye. Also, glass eyes for people who are missing eyes. So it doesn't always have to replace the function of what it's replacing. For example, glass eye doesn't help you see, it's more cosmetic. So people who are injured and have injuries that prevent them from looking like a normal person would can have a prosthetic that would be cosmetically functional. We've actually begun developing more and more realistic arms. So before, you'd see people with just claws, but now we actually have fully functional arms where you can like move. Okay, so prosthetics. What do they have to do with the neuron? The neuron is a type of cell in your body that transfers signals. And in order for you to be able to control these prosthetic limbs, you need to be able to send signals to them. So these prosthetics, like the fake hand, would need to communicate with your neurons. So that when you would activate the neurons that would normally move your missing hand, the robot would sense that and move accordingly. Besides that, the neuron's very important in feeling. Every time you feel something, pressure, hot, cold, pain, itch, those are all neurons that are helping you feel. They're also what makes up your brain, so they help you with your thought and your memory. So they're basically one of the most important cells in your entire body because they occur everywhere. What does a neuron look like? This first part we're going to call the head of the neuron. It has these octopus tentacle-like things. They're called dendrites. But more importantly, what they do, they receive signals. So they receive chemical signals from other neurons. And they kind of form long chains like this. So this neuron will send chemical messengers, which are basically just like little chemicals. So these are your messengers. And they carry the signals into this neuron. So this is kind of where we're receiving the signal here in the neuron. Also, what's very important in the head is this part. This part's called the nucleus. It contains DNA. Now, DNA is like the blueprints for your entire body. So what's in here, the DNA, tells the neuron what kind of neuron it is. It tells you if it's a brain neuron, a feeling neuron, different types of neurons. And so basically this will tell it how to form itself and how to shape itself and how long it needs to be and all kinds of things like that. Now we're going to talk about this part, and I'm calling this the tail because it kind of looks like a tail. And what happens is once we receive these chemical signals up here, it creates an electrical signal. So it sends electricity down here. And this signal travels to the foot where the next important thing happens. Now at the foot, we have a special section, which I've already described here. This section right here, where the two neurons meet, it's called a synapse. And the synapse is important because that's where we have interaction between two different neurons and where chemical and electrical signals get converted into one another. If we focus up on the synapse, we'd have something that looks like this, where we have two neurons coming together and a bunch of little chemicals going down into this other neuron. And that's how signals get sent in your body. So we have electricity going on up here, and then we have electricity down here. And why we have chemicals here is because the electricity, if it gets in between here, it'll actually dissipate, which means it'll discharge and go everywhere, and so we'll lose the signal. So that's why we have to change from an electrical to a chemical signal there. So we talked about that neurons use electricity. Now, how do we get electricity to go somewhere? In order to do this, we need to generate a voltage. It's kind of abstract. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you that voltage is like a waterfall. What's the difference here between point A and point B? Point B is lower. So we have some height here. So we'll say this height is 25 feet. Now, since there is a difference in height, we all know that this water will flow and turn into a waterfall and fill this lower area here. This is similar in electricity, except we don't have feet in electricity, we have volts. So if we separate 2 points by 25 volts, or actually any difference in volts, we actually cause what we call electrons to flow. So instead of water, we have electrons flowing. So what's an electron? Here we have an atom, and we'll have these green balls be protons, and they have a positive charge. You can remember protons positive because they both start with P. And these blue balls will be neutrons, neutral, both ends. Electrons fly around the nucleus and have a negative charge. And electrons are what electricity is. So we have a nerve cell, and that's about 0.03 volts. And going up, a AA battery is 1.5 volts. A car uses a 12-volt battery. Defibrillators, which you use to revive people in cardiac arrest, has 750 volts. And the high-speed bullet trains that actually use electricity to hover off the ground and kind of shoot along metal rails has 25,000 volts. And a lightning bolt, well, that's 1 billion volts. So you can see that a neuron is very small compared to other things we have in nature. So next, we're going to talk about what do we mean by neurons charging up? Well, there's actually a fancy term called action potential. The required voltage the neuron has to generate in order to send a signal. So basically, you can think of this like a power source with a bunch of lights on it. And each time we generate some volts, we get another little bar in here. So here we have 1 volt. We got another one, but we're not at the top yet. Get another one in there. And finally, we get enough volts to reach this action potential. Once we reach the action potential, we can send that signal out to the rest of the body. And so you can kind of think of this as rubbing your feet on the carpet when it's cold and it's windy and it's dry out, and then you get the static on your fingers and you go up and shock your friends. Except the thing is, neurons don't have carpets. So how do they charge up? Well, they use what we call ions. Well, an ion is a special type of atom. Now, in a normal atom, the number of electrons equals the number of protons. And that's important because that means the whole molecule, or the whole atom, is neutral. So we have 4 electrons, and we have 4 protons. And since they're opposite charges, they cancel each other out, and we have a net 0 charge. But what's an ion? How do we get charges? Say I came over here, I took my eraser, I was like, bam. So that means we don't have 4 electrons anymore. We only have 3. So that means these numbers don't add up. And that way, we'll have a positive ion. Does that make sense? So we take electrons away, and we get a positive ion. If we do the opposite, if we come in here and take out one of our protons in the nucleus, we have a net negative ion. And basically, what's cool about ions is they attract each other. So the positive ions will come together with the negative. The most common example is salt. So table salt, we have sodium and chloride. Sodium has a positive charge, and chloride has a negative charge. So they come together, and they form table salts, and they become neutral. But what's important about neurons is that they use ions to charge up that voltage. So again, we can come back to our waterfall metaphor here. So we have this flat basin with water. We can't really get any water to flow. So what the neuron will do, it will take in positive charges. And each time it takes one in, this gets a little higher. So say it takes in 1 or 2 charges. We get a little bit higher here, and some water flows. But just a little bit of water flows. And say we have some kind of wheel over here that we want to spin, and that means sending the signal. So we're still not high enough. So what the neuron then does is it takes in even more positive ions. And when it takes in enough, we actually reach the required voltage, or in this case, the required height, to cause this wheel to spin, which means sending a signal. So the neuron takes in ions until it has enough voltage to send a signal. Today's event went awesome. The kids were very excited. The events and activities went great. They were really into it.
We used stories of these historical characters to get their perspective on how they were involved in prosthetics and their contributions to the field.
So we just want to basically find a way to connect to the kids, and kids like funny things, and so we try to be funny for them. So what do? We cut off that part completely.
Hello, I'm Herodotus. How are you doing today?
It's really a lot better for us to use humor than dry, monotone PowerPoint slides.
We loved coming out here and doing this, and it's a fun break from school for us, as well as getting to actually talk about what we're learning outside of the classroom, outside of the laboratory, and sharing our passion for science with someone else, and hopefully spreading the seeds of that passion that will grow up later.